I'm so thrilled to bring out the creative principles behind two of Netflix's biggest and best recent shows, Three Body Problem and Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is a panel about collaboration, and I'm so glad that we have, folks from the VFX side and the production design side. And I was wondering sort of what that collaboration is like between those two departments. Anybody can start.
Well, neither of us are anything without each other.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of it. The production designers might start earlier, concepting and getting the tone and the feel of the show, and then figuring out how much we build, and then our visual effects colleagues, take over.
Yeah.
But the epic nature of the shows that we're working on wouldn't be what they are without the visual effects component. And for that, people like me are very, very grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for our show, we really try to work as almost one large department, especially early on when we're developing ideas. Michael's really setting the tone and the look, and we're working in tandem to figure out how we're actually going to accomplish these things. Where does the practical build end? Where does the visual effects begin? And, really following the lead that Michael is setting in terms of the tone, the style of the show. We want to honor that and maintain that through, the final frames.
Yeah. Michael, you want to talk about that at all?
Well, it's just interesting. I was thinking about it while others were talking, and I've been doing this for so long that I have gone through like a lot of changes with VFX, and it has given us designers so much freedom that we can say like, oh, and by the way, can this also be 300 feet tall, and stuff that we could never, ever, ever do before. And so they have freed us up and let our imaginations run completely amok, and in a really bad way usually. And so it's it just struck me as you asked the question, is like, wow, this has been, I started out doing like TV shows, and then I got an opportunity to work on Men in Black movie, and this was when visual effects it was like a really early on kind of thing, and I didn't know what anybody was talking about, and I didn't know how it worked, and I didn't know what anybody was doing, and just to see the magic that very low, I would call that very low tech stuff was happening then, and what we do now and what these guys do. It's so great because we can still be designers and we can still create worlds, and we can also make them like insanely great looking.
Is it a thing where you guys are checking in with the various departments on like, before I start designing a crazy creature that has to be on screen for 20 minutes, do you check in and say, is this possible? Like, how is that sort of back and forth? Deborah's nodding. Okay.
I think there's a constant communication between both worlds. Mm-hmm. It has to be, because otherwise you have to be in line with each other, So if there's no alignment, then it won't get done.
Yeah.
So, and I think what you said earlier, like you have to define where production design ends and visual effects starts. And I think, that's a constant process that's even during the shooting and even after the shoot, like really crucial. So that the communication is up and everyone is aligned.
Yeah. I mean, Jabbar, I wanted to ask you, because you wear so many different hats on Avatar, like, what is that like for you, kind of coordinating all those aspects, and also being a director and a visual effects person, and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, when wearing many hats, it's the closest to directing a feature, that I've had the experience since I directed a feature. And it really is, we sit down and just talk about the script and the story we want to tell. And it really all comes down to story and what best supports story. That's one of the reasons I really love working with Michael. It's like he's coming at it from story. And how does this design of this character's environment embody that character? How does it take the story we're trying to tell and elevate it and support it? And that's really how I look at visual effects as well. It's all in service of the story and the characters.
Right. When you first sign on to a project, what is the first step of your process? Are you reaching out to different departments? Are you just sort of, getting into the flow of things? Is a blank page something that is daunting, or something that you look forward to?
Usually when we start a project is like getting familiar with the script, looking at storyboards. There's usually also previs available that you can check, and hopefully also a lot of concept art. And usually from production design, there's a lot of stuff to look at too. So just getting familiar into it, and that's, I think, the first time when you wrap your mind around it, you form like a visual of what the shot's going to look like. I think that's when your brain starts to form the first visuals.
So when I start, usually there's little more than an outline coming from our showrunners. And so it all starts with just trying to define the tone of the show. So when it came to Three Body Problem, I quickly realised that I wasn't in Westeros anymore with the guys. And, there was a chaotic world, a stable world, a domestic world, a cosmic kind of VR world. And, we were lurching all the way from, the darkest hours of, Cultural Revolution China all the way into the future. So the concept of defining a tone was something that, what was going to hold it all together. And that occupied a lot of my time, and we were concepting, just trying to stab in the dark and see what the guys were reacting to. And as it turned out, the same rules that I followed in Westeros actually applied to this one, which was, making a very grounded world for all of these, different scenes to take place in. And that's ended up being, I think, what tied it all together.
Yeah, for, The Last Airbender, it's based on an animated series. So we had a palette, but we needed to take that palette and adapt it to a live action, grounded reality. So a lot of the conversations were around how far do we take this? How saturated should this be? How much do we want it to feel like a period piece versus a fantasy piece? So a lot of it was tone as well. It's really like, what is the world that we're building and what do we want it to feel like?
Usually when we start, it's obviously looking at scripts, and what we'll do is we'll start breaking down the scripts. We need to figure out like how much the show is going to cost. In tandem, we'll have a previs department that'll start working on previs, and we'll start building things rudimentarily just to help figure out camera placement, things like that. In tandem with working with Wylie and his team, obviously figuring out like what the sets are going to be built. Like once Wylie's team is starting to refine the sets and figured out like, okay, what's happening, then we start to bring that into our previs and start adapt our previs around his worlds that he's coming up with. In tandem when we're starting, it's obviously meeting all the department heads and getting to, talk about the show, figure out the budget, and figure out also how we're going to make all this work together.
I mean, jumping off of what Deborah and Jabbar talked about a little bit, these shows are both really unique in that they have these very different worlds within the show, whether it is the VR world, whether it is, communist China, and then like with Avatar, you just have so many different, environments and cultures and all of that. And I was wondering what that was like. Like, what are the challenges and the rewards of having to create all these sort of mini aesthetics within the overall show?
For me, it was like being in the art department Olympics and being in every event all at once. The thing was that there was never really one place where you could feel comfortable. And I was saying just before that the whole idea of, settling back into a medieval world just never happened. It was, so fast and such different worlds that it really kept me on my toes all the way through. So it was a very challenging and exhausting experience, both obviously for the art department and everyone else, and particularly visual effects.
We're going to give you the gold medal for the Olympics. Jabbar, do you want to talk? I mean, even I was rewatching the first episode, and just the amount of locations and visual effects and creatures, I mean, it's really astounding. I mean, how do you wrap your head around that?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's certainly a road show, and so there was always something different on screen. But I rely heavily on Wylie and his department. They're looking at like what are our cultural references, how are we staying authentic and true to those, and also where are we blending things, because we are a fantasy world. We don't want this is exclusively Japan. That's all we're pulling from. So when it came to visuals, even when it came to our instrumentation and our music, we were pulling purposely from different regions to ensure it didn't feel like we were making something that was supposed to be our world. It is certainly a fantasy world, but we want to take liberties in certain ways to add flair and additional design, but we want to remain authentic and have a palette that makes sense. So the Fire Nation feels like the Fire Nation, and Omashu feels like Omashu, which was a lot of South Asian influence, for example. So you don't want it to feel like everything's a collage, but you also don't want it to feel like, oh, that is supposed to be India.
Right.
So I think there was a lot of like pulling from different places, but also trying to be unique in our world.
Yeah, usually when we start a show, I have this like existential dread of this blank piece of paper, and it's like, oh, now I have to work and make up stuff.
Right.
And, it's awful. But there was a series that I could look at.
Yep.
And it really paved the way for where the show was going to go, obviously, for everybody. But that really freed me up to do what I love, which is, like, why are we here? What is this? What part of this story are we trying to tell by where we are? And so I got freed up in a lot of ways. It was a lot of work. I mean, I think there was like 15,000 sets in the first episode. So it was a lot of work, but it was also like, it's a road show, it's a fun ride, and we're supposed to have fun with it, and it's supposed to be beautiful, and I'm not a designer that I don't like to work in a world of groundedness, because I work on these sort of wacky shows sometimes where you have to believe as the viewer that if you have fire coming out of your wrists, you have to be in a place that would like let that exist.
Yeah.
And so we needed to create these worlds that were just a little bit fantastical and a little bit, and something that you can't just open your curtain and look out the front window and see. So there's a lot of maths going into what we do, and we could have just copied the animated series, but we wanted to give these kids like story arcs, and we wanted to make it really beautiful, and wanted to make an adventure worthy of the material.
Well, that's the challenge in both shows too, right? There has to be sort of a level of reality established, but also when crazy stuff happens, you have to accept that as well.
It's my favorite fight with studio executives. They're like, no, it has to be grounded. And it's like, they have fire coming out of their elbows. Like,
yeah. Deborah, did you find any? What was that like for you?
Well, I realised at a certain point when I was interviewing for Game of Thrones that the secret to the show, because I arrived in season 4, was that they had to treat the dragons like dogs. And in order to believe in dragons, it was important to believe in the rest of the world around them. And when I first read the book of Three Body Problem, it's incredibly overwhelming and it's really intimidating. But by applying the same rule with the science and the aliens as I did with the dragons, that was my entry point. So I soon understood that it wasn't science fiction that I had to get through my head. It was actually science fact. My job was to make the science appear real, and then hopefully aliens will follow.
Let's talk about specifics here. Jabbar, Marion, I was told 3,400 visual effects. Is this true? Okay. Can you talk about how you pulled those off, and what was the most daunting part of that? Was it volume, or were there specifics that really sent you over the edge?
No, I mean, it was scope, right? It's not just about 3,400 shots. It's about 3,400 hard shots, right? So, there's creatures, there's environments, and there's all the bending. And, trying to come up with a way to convey what Wylie's trying to say, where it's fantastical, but, we would try to make the bending feel like it could adhere to physics. We had to come up with the reasons why it wasn't adhering to physics, for instance, with water bending, because water just falls to the ground. But yeah, I mean, look, luckily, Jabbar and I have worked together a long time, and it all really starts when you're on set, right? Unfortunately, I wasn't on set from the very beginning, but even in the reshoots, we really try to figure out what's happening while we're on set so we get the best footage, right? So then we take that footage, and then we also, Jabbar and I have worked a long time together, and we work really hard on our assets, right? Because everything is about the assets that we're building and putting in a 3D environment. So if you take the time to build the assets to where they all look good, you spend less time when you get to shot work. You can focus on the shot work and not trying to create the assets and do the shots at the same time. So we have a very methodical workflow as far as previs, shoot, assets, work on shots. And then we spend a lot of time with post-viz and pre-viz to help to make sure that the story's being told. We're big on scale and everything like that to make sure our creatures all work in the environment with all of our cameras. So our methodical workflow has helped us be able to finish shows that have 3,400 shots, shows that have 2,700 shots, shows that have 4,400 shots. We do a lot of shots.
Jabbar, you want to talk about that collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, I think our process has evolved over the years. We started on Lost in Space together, season 1 of Lost in Space. We did season 1, 2, 3, and then we did Stranger Things season 4, which was our 4,400 shot show with 32 vendors.
In fairness, every episode was about 90 minutes. So
yes,
yeah,
exactly. So, but it was one of those things when we first looked at the cut of the last episode of season 4 on Stranger Things. It was like, well, they're going to cut that down. There's no way that's what we're going to do. And then we're like, oh no, we never worked with the Duffers before. That's what we're doing. We're making this show. And so we just said, okay, what process can get us through? And it's a lot of, because we've been working together so long, our aesthetic is very aligned. We're all about storytelling. That's what we want to do, is tell the story, enhance the story. So we can then divide and conquer. Once we are like, okay, what is this effect going to look like? We get aligned on what the effect is. And then whether he's looking at a shot or I'm looking at a shot, our notes are very similar. And I can go through Marion's versions of a playlist and say, okay, I want to add one note here and one note here, and let's adjust the wording on that. And he can look at my notes and do the same thing, so we can get through, a massive amount of versions in, not as much time as it would have taken us had it been 2016 we were starting to work together.
Well, as a director and a visual effects producer, I mean, are you shooting things with that in mind in a way that maybe someone with less visual effects experience wouldn't?
I mean, the upside of shooting is I actually don't think about visual effects that much in the front of my mind.
Oh, okay.
I have Marion there. He's looking at the green screen. He's looking at where actors are and where the tennis ball is and making sure eye lines are right, and I'm thinking about performance. So that's really another place where the trust comes in. I trust him to get everything that we're going to need for visual effects, so I don't think about visual effects except for how it affects performance, actors, and story.
Jabbar comes in handy, obviously being showrunner as well. He can figure out where we want to spend our time and pick our battles, which is what helps us finish the shows on time and having them look as good as they do.
Yeah.
It's not just collaboration, it's trust between all of the departments. That's what makes it work, and that's what makes it work in the time period that we're given, I think, because none of us can do the work by ourselves.
Right.
And it happens far more quickly and far more efficiently, when you have a great history with the people that you're working with.
Right. Boris, Deborah, let's talk a little bit about episode 5. You know what we're going to talk about. That ship that goes into a million pieces. I am just fast. This sequence was just so mind-blowing to me. And Deborah, maybe if you want to talk about the conception of it, and then Boris, if you want to talk about what actually went into chopping up 1,000 people on a boat.
Setting up Judgment Day started in episode 2 when we're inside Augie's nanotech lab. It was there that the concept of the nanofibers was introduced, such that there was a little a diamond that went up through the fibers. So it was there that it was established that the fibers were static and the object had to travel through. And so it's exactly that principle that's applied then in episode 5 when we're talking about the ship. The fibers came up out of the water, remained static, and then the boat would sail through those fibers. And exactly what that would look like and how it would work was something that was broken down very heavily into stages. How exactly would they set it up? We had a set at the side of a lake in Dorney Court in England there. So, you saw Wade and his engineers doing all of that. We built half a deck, I think it was, out in the car park in Shepperton, where they landed a helicopter and you saw those kids behind the cyclone fence. We also built a couple of corridors on stage. There was what was called the executive corridor that had Mike Evans' office and Felix's office, and we had the public corridor, which had the sort of the school and the cafeteria. And and then we had the staircase that Evans jumps off, and then we had a fantastic set of all of the debris of the aftermath. And what we were trying to do was work out, as this ship slices, what slices first and how would that happen? Which direction does Mike have to run in? At what, what's cut first, second, third? And this is obviously all in conjunction with all of the other departments, particularly special effects. and visual effects, because unfortunately it's not actually real, Drew.
What? What? Oh my God, this is eye-opening for me. Boris, do you want to talk? I mean, Scanline famously, like, they're known for their water effects that are so beautiful and physics and stuff like that. But talk about what it was like with the sequence.
Yeah, we luckily had a little bit time to prepare before like the shots were turned over, so we had a little bit of a time frame where we could like prepare for what's coming our way, because we had to create like the whole Panama Canal like photoreal in CG, so there was no plate filmed from there, and we worked on a very specific landmark called Culebra Cut, which is carved out of a rock, so it is famous for these terraces. So we had to create a photoreal environment. That was one of the biggest challenges at the beginning to wrap our minds around. And then obviously we used Scanline's Flowline water tool to simulate the water and everything. So, but I think the biggest challenge was to wrap our minds around how these nanofibers cut through a tanker. What does it look like when a big object like a big tanker really crashes into the shore, being sliced into pieces? And it is a multitude of different effects that happen at the same time. There's smoke, there's fire, there's the physics simulation of the ship destroying, there is pieces falling in the water, big splashes of water, the ship plowing through the sand, crashing into the shoreline. So all these effects have to work together, and it's very complex and render intense like technology that we use for that stuff. So that was really challenging. Yeah. And then making sure that the story is told over the whole edit. Right. So that there's a continuity, and then it makes sense when we cut to the interior and the exterior, that it all makes sense in the timing of that whole event. Yeah. And then, inside we had to chop a lot of people up, like you said. So we killed a lot of people. Yeah. Evans.
Oh, that was fake too? Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay.
But we also did like smaller stuff, like I don't know if you remember the scene with the paper cut people.
Yeah, of course.
That was a small effect, but it was fun to work on because it's visually so powerful, I think.
Deborah brings up a good point, even though she just burned me so bad, about what is sort of practically built and what is sort of a visual effect. And I was wondering if you could all sort of speak to when those decisions are made, how early you're thinking about divvying up those responsibilities and then sort of bringing them to life.
We try and work with the idea that we capture as much in camera as we possibly can, and then visual effects will extend it. So there's always sort of a basic understanding of how much the art department might or might not have to do. But obviously we all stand around white card models, we all stand around digital models, and we figure it out. Yeah. Because it doesn't happen by itself. You know, we've all got to decide, and and it comes down to budget, it comes down to time. There's a lot of factors at play. But these decisions are made quite early.
Team Avatar, break it down.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at very similar stuff. We're looking at what needs to exist in camera for actors to interact with, whether that be standing on it, hugging Appa's leg, and we build those elements. Even if, for instance, with Appa's leg, it's going to eventually be digital, we want to give Gordon and the actors something to interact with, something to see on set to help draw that performance out of them. So that really drives a lot of the decisions that we're making in terms of when we start thinking about it. I mean, really, it's at the script stage. I'm thinking about blocking. I'm thinking about sets. We're thinking about all that stuff way before we're ever sitting in a space with actors and making those decisions as far ahead of time as we possibly can.
Yeah, and then to get a little bit more technical, we use previs, right, to help us illustrate these areas of where the dividing line will be. We work hand in hand with the art department. As their assets are getting built, we'll bring their assets, into 3D, and then that's where we can really figure out like where that dividing line is going to be. A lot of times it comes down to cost. How much does it cost for production to be able to build that actual the element that we're going to use to film everything on. So it's really a hand in hand figuring out where the dividing line is, and we have previs. Once we go into previs, we also do techvis, which techvis helps illustrate where the green or the blue screen or would be relative to the environment that's being built by the production design.
Jabbar, as a director on the show, do you feel pretty comfortable sort of explaining what these things are going to be to the performers and other people on set?
Yeah, I mean, look, the great thing about our cast is it's a lot of young performers, and they actually are some of the best folks at envisioning things that don't exist. So I usually try to, work with the visual effects team, work with production design to say, hey, these are the things that are going to be there, just with imagery. Hey, here's what Appa's going to look like. Here's what Omashu is going to look like. Showing that to them before we step into the space, so when they look at a green screen back there, they're seeing Omashu, and really trying to orient them in space using imagery. And then we just talk about the scene, and really, Gordon actually prefers working with a tennis ball for Momo, because for him, he is able to imagine the most if there's nothing or very little there. We had a little puppet that was Momo as well, and he didn't prefer working with that because it was sort of a weird facsimile of Momo. Instead of in his own mind, he could create whatever Momo gave him that other performer to work with.
A lot of people talk about invisible visual effects and things that maybe people will not recognize as being visual effects, things that aren't the big show-stopping moments, but I was wondering if you guys wanted to highlight maybe a moment or an element that might have passed people by.
We had a lot of people in our team who requested not to work on this stuff because they couldn't deal with it, so we respected that. I personally didn't have a problem. I can still kind of imagine its polygons and pixels. But to be honest, I think watching it over because we watch these things over and over. So you see a person being cut in pieces, falling down over and over with blood. Yeah, that does something to you. No, but yeah, we tried with everything we do to make it as photoreal as possible, or as realistic as possible, because it helps the audience to immerse in it.
Yeah. Deborah, anything you remember?
I think the thing that most people may not think about is what visual effects had to deal with our headsets.
Oh.
Those headsets actually came together relatively quickly in the process. David and Dan and Alex were most interested in the idea of them being something that in 2024 we just don't understand. There shouldn't be any on-off switches, there shouldn't be any charging ports, we wouldn't understand how this very advanced technology works. And for book readers, you'll understand why it was preferable that the headset be that chrome mirror finish. So you can imagine just how popular I was with visual effects when that came along. Because obviously when the actor put that headset on, they were looking at the car, they were looking at the crew, they were looking at the lights, they were looking at everything that you wouldn't want to be seeing on the show was just reflected in this thing. So every time you see a headset, think of all the replacement work that visual effects had to do. And then I was even more popular when we put the mirrored headset onto the mirrored desk. So that was dealing with reflections upon reflections. So it looked really cool and I loved it. But it didn't make me at all popular.
How many fingerprints did that thing pick up? That's what I was thinking about the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. So there was our on-set art director, and props guys always had these sort of special cloths and would run in and polish them. Wow. I also loved the big box that it came into with the embossed name. Yeah. It was a really great hero prop, but it caused all manner of pain.
We didn't work on that part, by the way, but I know a little bit how they did it. So it's, I think, really interesting. They replaced the headset in all the shots.
Oh, really?
So they had to film a 360 version of the room and everything in it, and then really project the reflections onto a CG replica of the thing. Mm-hmm. And I think it was pretty well done.
Deborah,
I
think
didn't
about
work on it.
how
I
much
don't want to
pain.
take the
I know,
credit
but
for it.
she creates this mirrored headset, and then you guys don't see your families for weeks. You're just changing it. It's fine. Jabbar, talk to me.
So our show, we don't have as many opportunities for invisible effects because of the nature of our show. But one of the things that I was really proud of is at the end of the pilot, there is this moment where Aang goes into the avatar state, which of course is a lot of visual effects going on. But in that sequence, we actually ended up deciding that we wanted a bit more performance from Gordon and for him to be feeling the pain of the memory that was going on of the death of Gyatso, his mentor. And unfortunately, Gordon had grown so much from when we shot the original scene to when we made that decision. There was only one solution, which was, well, let's use our digital scan of Gordon from when he was a 12-year-old and remap Gordon's current age performance onto his body.
Whoa.
So Marion actually went up to Vancouver, did a dot pass on Gordon. I was on Zoom, directed Gordon over Zoom while Marion technically captured his performance, and then we put that on young Gordon. But even all the closest close-ups on his face, that's all a digital performer that is driven by Gordon's performance. And when we were watching the reactions that people have to all these things on YouTube to your show, they were talking about Gordon in that moment, and they're like, that's really good wire work right there. And we're like, all right, cool, we did it. If they think it's wire work as the effect we did, then we did a good Gordon.
Yeah, that's insane. Marion, do you want to talk about that? I mean, that's insane. Yeah.
Well, I'll start with the asset, right? When you're trying to build a digital human, it's something that everyone in this room really knows when it's working or it's not working, right? Because that's something that we're most familiar with. So that's really our hardest task out there as visual effects artists and or supervisors. But yeah, we have this, our previous supervisor, Dirk Bach, he puts a camera so damn close to everything. He pitched this idea to us and it was like, holy cow, this is gonna be nuts. Luckily, when we started working with one of our vendors, Rodeo Effects, we knew that they did good digi-doubles from our experience on Stranger Things. So we made sure from the very beginning our hero assets were very high res, and we would need to use them at times. Never this close, though, I'll be honest with you. But then luckily we were able to put the fidelity that we needed. And then obviously when we were there capturing Gordon, Gordon just did an amazing performance. He had already grown. I think he was 13 then, maybe not quite 14 then. He had grown so much, his face is completely different, but he had his performance, it's amazing how even much better he was. But yeah, it really gets into the technicality of marking up his face, making sure the lighting's right, and we take that digital character and then remap that onto our younger Gordon, basically.
Okay. Seems fairly straightforward. I think we can all probably do it at home. As is evidenced by Boris's classic Midwestern accent, this is a global community that comes together for these movies and shows, and I was wondering what that was like, working with different vendors in different countries, and what that whole process was like for everybody.
I just want to chop people up.
Do a little of the Boris.
Boris is coming for your job.
No, look, working with our vendors is great, and luckily Jabbar and I have been together so long that we've found vendors that we trust, right? Because it even starts with the vendors that we trust, and so we always lean into specific vendors. Although with shows that have 3,400 shots, you have to go out and you find new vendors. It's really just about collaborating with them, and I think the most important thing that we do that is a little different than I've seen in the past from VFX supervisors is we let our vendors be part of the process, right? We don't want our vendors to just be executors, right? They're responsible for sequences, and they dive into those sequences on a micro level on a day-to-day basis. We have 3,400 shots in our head. They typically have anywhere from 100 to 400 shots in their head. We want them to point out the things that are problems, right, ahead of time, so that way we can actually make decisions ahead of time to fix those issues, which ultimately make the work look better. So I think as far as vendors goes, it's really about collaborating with vendors and letting them be part of the process.
Is that how you felt, Boris, on Three Body?
Like I said, I'm one of the vendors on.
Yes, that's what I know. I want to know if did you feel like
I was also like a vendor for these guys. I worked with them on Avatar as well.
What? Wait, we should be talking about that.
How did you feel, Boris? How
Boris,
did we treat you?
What was the experience? Yeah.
The experience was great.
Okay.
I think like
Correct
with
answer.
Stefan Fangmeier. I'm talking about Three Body Prom. Working with Stefan Fangmeier and Steve Kalbeck was a great experience. I think like from the get-go, we got along pretty well. We had the same kind of like vision for the stuff. We suggested a lot of creative solutions for a lot of shots that nobody really knew how they would end up. Like for example, a rehydration, dehydration sequence, or like.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. That is also one of the most amazing things in the show.
That was tricky to do because, like, how does it look like that a skin roll being thrown in a pool unrolls and a human creature is kind of like evolving out of it? So there was a lot of technical and visual challenges.
Artistic challenges, though,
yes,
too.
Yeah.
You guys don't undersell yourself as true artists here,
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of artistry going into that.
Yeah.
The look of the pool, the look of how does the transition from a leathery skin to a human skin look like, and we chose like to go through that jello subsurface scattery look where you see the inner skeleton of the character. And I think that looked pretty amazing, especially when you look at the sun and you see the bones inside of these bodies.
Deborah, working on that stuff, were you like, how are they going to bring this to life?
Yeah, that was hilarious, all of that. Like they got like a yoga mat thing and just roll it out.
Yeah.
But so on stage we had a partial build, and we used the tank as the rehydration pool. And what Boris's team created, I think, was really, really successful. Yeah. And when the little girl dehydrates out on the thing, when she just lies down and it's really affecting.
Yeah, that was insane. Are you into cutting people up or rehydrating them more, Boris?
No, I'm into visual effects.
Visual effects. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And to be fair, also working with you guys was fun.
Okay, good.
Let's talk about Boris. What did you do for them?
We worked on the Northern Tribe. I was just one supervisor for Scanline, working on a multitude of shots. Scanline did like Koizilla, which I was not part of. That was the big water simulation stuff.
Okay.
I created more like the Northern Tribe city.
Okay.
And was in charge of the whole environment build for the Northern Tribe.
Wow. A challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was fun working with you guys too.
It was great working with you too.
I love the love on this stage. It's so good. I mean,
no, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Like with what we do, that you have fun in what you do and you like the team you work with. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about collaboration, and that's what it's all about, right?
I have one quick fun story. We did a talk a couple of weeks ago, and Boris said to me, like, man, I thought you and Jabbar were like roommates or something. The way you guys come into these reviews and are just talking and laughing and having fun, which that made me feel really good, because Jabbar and I, we are like bros, right? We've been doing this for a long time together. But for someone to be able to recognize, that we are just really trying to have fun was, inspiring for me to just continue being who we are.
But that also must take work too, right? Like that kind of level of psychic communication and enjoyment. I mean, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of people working on this that you're...
It's one of the bad things about this industry sometimes is that, being able to work together for a long time is a really great thing. Like shorthand is a really great thing. And we're very often flung around, like lost socks in a dryer. We don't know what show we're going to work on next, and you might come into a whole new team. So when you get to work with people again, it's really awesome. The shorthand is amazing.
Well, I mean, we know that the shows are coming back for 2 more seasons each, and is everybody kind of staying put? Is this collaboration going forward? Is what
I hope so. Yeah.
Deborah, have you started? Yes. Okay. I think we can say yes. Yeah, Deborah.
I've been working with these guys since 2013. I don't know anything different. Yeah. I've either got a really bad case of Stockholm Syndrome or I'm onto a really good thing, and I choose to stay with the really good thing.
Yeah. Jabbar, are you thinking about...
Yeah, I mean, we're considering Wylie. No, I'm just kidding. No, we're all already working together. He was on his phone showing us models in the green room, so we're working away.
Yeah.
I got to take my shots when I can get them.
So what is the secret to a continued successful collaboration?
I mean, I think it's communication and collaboration and honesty and transparency, right? We're all working together to try to make the same show, and if we're open and upfront and respectful with one another, like, we're going to make great things. We're making really hard television. No one knows exactly how to make it. We're figuring it out together.
Well, in both shows too, I feel like there are things that we have never seen before in any kind of show. I mean, a tiny particle that is also a supercomputer that's flying around the world and all of this, and everything in Avatar we've never seen before. I mean, a complete fantasy world.
If anybody tells you they know what they're doing, they're lying, and you shouldn't believe them.
Really?
Yeah.
Including you.
Yes.
Especially him.
God, yeah. God, yes.
I mean, but you're facing that kind of daunting proposition, you just kind of have to do it one step at a time, right? Yeah. Any insight?
Oh yeah, I mean it's super hard, right? But that's part of our job, and you know, I have a personal saying is just like take a deep breath, keep going. The train's got to keep moving, and be collaborative and communicate, right? I mean that's really what it comes down to. Like we're not saving lives, but we're making cool stuff that people love, which is great.
Yeah.
If you look at these things as a whole, and you'll go completely crazy. You have to. It's got to be a list. Then you just got to constantly tick stuff off and forget about it. But if you look at it as a whole, like we're going to do 8 more episodes of this show. Like I would never sleep again if I thought about that as like a whole thing. So.
Yeah. And also you have to keep in mind there's a lot of people working on it that are not here on the stage
Yeah,
right
absolutely.
now.
Yeah.
So we have huge teams of really talented people working on it, and so sometimes people surprise me too. You know, they show me something and there's a complete new way of seeing a creative thing, and maybe we sometimes explore like a different route, and I think that's what it's about, like having a good team collaboration with talented artists, and I think that's what everybody.
There's always another better way, and
Yeah.
that's the people that you want to work with.
Right.
Yeah.
And plus two, all boats rise together. And I think that's really important as well, that we can lift each other up at the same time. And because we've all worked with the same team for such a long time, it's the trust that's so important. It's the shortcuts that are so important. It's a sense of taste and aesthetics. And, when we are the loose socks in the dryer, it's just so hard to find, something to hold on to. And when you've got really great collaboration, it's a wonderful thing to be able to keep that going.
And it seems like everybody wants to top themselves too, to do more, to do better, to do, things that people haven't seen before. So that seems to be part of the drive as well.
Without a doubt.
Yeah?
You might as well. You're there.
Yeah. Well, jumping off what Boris said of seeing these shots come in, there's that element of it, and then there's also the element of the shows actually going out into the world and having people respond. And I was wondering what that was like for all of you, having this amazing response to both shows.
Yeah, that's rewarding. I mean, if something is successful that you worked on for a long time and you put like a lot of effort in and people like it, it's very rewarding.
Yeah.
Even being here on stage talking about it, I think it's it's rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deborah?
I thought it was just a relief. Many times throughout the show, because we were jumping all over the place, and as I said, I never really felt like I had a true kind of hold on it. I didn't exactly know what we were making or what it would look like when it was edited together. And I remember when the trailers started coming out, I thought, that actually looks quite cool. Yeah. I think we're onto something. Yeah. And when the audience responded to it, it was just thrilling. It's really a great and satisfying thing.
Yeah.
I think for me and Airbender, it was very stressful for the release because we have this fan base that is huge, and they want the show the way they think it should be. And what I was really trying to do is, I was also a fan of the animated series. Is like, let's make the show that is the one that everyone's been hoping they were going to get, being as true as we could be to all of the animation that came before us. But we are making a different show. We have to make a different show. Like, for the show to exist, there has to be a reason, and that reason is we want to make this live action version, which has to be an adaptation. And there's a lot of stress that goes with like, oh man, we changed that. Should we have changed that?
Yeah.
We had to change that. Okay, let's just see what the fans think.
Yeah. Marion?
I was relieved when I first started working on it, and I told my family, who loved me very much, my sister and her husband and her kids, who were 18 and 21, they said, don't fuck this up.
Wow, the 18-year-old said that to you. Oh my
Yes.
God.
So I was like, okay, all right. So.
And what did they say when the show came out?
Oh, they actually loved it, and
Okay.
they're big fans. The kids watched it when they were kids. No, they're very proud of what we did. They thought all the decisions we made were good decisions, and the total fans can't wait for the next few seasons.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything of this show other than dailies when we were shooting, and I waited the whole year and a half for the teaser trailer to come out, and it was thrilling. I mean, to see all this stuff happening and all the things that people talked about endlessly and worked on, and it's so thrilling to see this stuff come together, especially for us who work on these shows where you have to put a lot of ingredients together and then you don't get to see it bake necessarily. To see it come on it's really thrilling and makes the years that you put into this stuff very well worth it.
Yeah, it's Christmas morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you also bring up this, these are beloved properties that you're adapting and things that have been adapted in other mediums and in different ways. And so I was wondering how that impacts the process and the ongoing collaboration of trying to bring a new version of that story to life.
I think you just have to be true to the team that you're working with. I mean, in my position, the way that we work with our showrunners, we're getting the advice from above, like creating these concepts and, putting the previs together and, all that sort of stuff. We're figuring it out as we go. And I have found over the years that if you sort of have the audience reaction in your mind too much right from the beginning, it's just far too overwhelming.
Yeah.
You have to feel like you have the freedom to be able to make suggestions and, to be able to offer up ideas and, and then take the guidance from the showrunners and see what flies. Because if you're too concerned from the start, you'll just freeze, and it's not healthy for anyone.
Right. I mean, is there a secret to capturing the spirit of the original without feeling so devoted to it that you can't change anything? I mean, Jabbar, I imagine that was top of mind for you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was a fan of the animated series, and I was just trying to make the show that I wanted to make, and I thought, not that I am representative of the entire fan base, but I thought, if I just stay true to my own vision as a fan of the show and make all the best decisions I can at every stage, then I'll have done my best to give the world the version that they want. I might be wrong, I might be right, but at least there is a vision and a direction there, and I can keep consistency, where I think if I was trying to chase, like, oh, well, that group's going to be upset by that, and that group's going to be upset by that, you start to make something that isn't yours, and then whose is it? Because I can really only make my version, and I just do my best to hope that encompasses, what is desired by the fan base.
And that goes along with production design and visual effects too, because there are so many kind of iconic images from the
you kind of can't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
They hired me to do kind of what I do, and if I change what I do to make it look like what I imagine somebody would. The internet is a horrible, terrible place, and so if you're worried about like what the reaction's going to be, I try to be calm and say, like, they hired me for maybe because no one else was available, but usually because I do the kind of stuff that I do. But I got to tell you, when that kid showed up with the costume on, I was like, oh, we got this.
You got it, yeah.
There was the perfect casting. It was like, this kid is born to play this role. So it actually let the pressure off, I think, for me a lot, because we were going to make a beautiful show either way. Maybe it didn't match the cartoon, or maybe something was different, but when that kid walked in with that monk's costume on, I was like, oh, this is true. This is going to be great.
Was the tattoo a makeup thing, or was that digital?
It was a makeup. It's only digital when it glows. But yeah, no, that was every single morning. Gordon had to have his head shaved, and sometimes by lunch the tattoo was starting to push up because his hair was growing back. His hair grows really fast, so every day he gets his head shaved.
Wow. Was there a moment like that, Deborah, on Three Body, where you were like, this is going to work?
No.
Okay. We appreciate the honesty. Yeah.
Excellent.
All right. Well, on that note, let us thank the amazing creative teams behind Three Body Problem and Avatar: The Last Airbender. Thank you all so much for being here. Yeah.